Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Marshall Hangout, which is for those of you who are not Marshall Scholars, and I'm really excited that some of you here aren't Marshall Scholars and maybe potential Marshall Scholars in the future. This is a series of talks that we've been running over the period of the pandemic, so just about a year, which have been done mostly by our alumni. And we're very excited today to have Matt Powers, a 2005 Marshall Scholar, former member of the military, who's going to be speaking about the transition between being in the military and going into the corporate area. So I will hand over to Matt. I'm also going to be doing a bit of a Chris Whitty with the next slide. So please forgive me if it all goes horribly wrong.
All right, great. Thanks, Mary. Hey, everyone. So small group today, and that's actually perfect. I love it. I'll get through kind of my couple slides and a little bit of background I put together pretty quickly, so I can open it up and open it up for questions. We can have a good dialogue conversation. Really excited to be here today. When I was talking to Mary, I said, "Hey, I'd be happy to give a talk." Mary was like, "Well, what do you do now?" And I do a lot of what Vikram Mittal was talking about a month ago. For the last almost 6 years, I've worked in the corporate world. I'm currently the head of strategy, marketing, and business development for a company called Gilbarco Veeder-Root. We make transportation technologies for retail environments. So what does that mean? Mostly, we make everything you see at gas stations, but we also make smart city devices. We make things that fix vehicles, electric vehicles, all that sort of stuff. And I actually got this job straight out coming out of the military. I was looking for a leadership position and I served as 2 years of the head of a department called customer service that managed all of our distributors in the US. And then I managed a product line for our US business in terms of payment solutions. Like if you ever pay with a credit card at a gas pump in UK or US, that's our devices that we developed out of Italy and deployed across the world. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved to India. So I'm in Mumbai, India right now, and took this head of business development position for a company that we bought about 9 years ago and was having some growing pains, acquisition pains, integration pains. And I've been doing that ever since. So I've had a pretty, I think, already successful corporate career. I've really enjoyed it, but that's not to say the military to corporate transition was completely smooth. And so Mary, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll start from, I guess a little bit more about my background. So after being a Marshall Scholar from 2005 to 2007, I was expecting to do something related to my studies. And that was the first time I heard needs of the Army. I was sitting in Belfast while I was attending Queen's University and got my very first military orders for like an active assignment. And it was to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama, which I immediately recognized as being the Army flight school. And I immediately called Indianapolis, our headquarters of the Army, for HR, and to this government servant, 14 or 15, Joel Strout. And I was like, "Hey, Joel, this is not what I signed up for. Like, am I going to be a pilot?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, it's the needs of the Army. It's we're doing this big surge. I don't know if you saw it in the news. I actually hadn't even been watching. And Bush just announced it like a week or two ago. And so we need like 2,000 pilots overnight. And so next thing I knew, instead of going to like Monterey, California or Fort Huachuca, Arizona or something like that to be, human intelligence officer or a foreign area officer or something like that, I was going to flight school to be a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. So that was a new introduction to me. And that actually was a pretty good introduction for the next 8 years of my life. And, honestly, in hindsight, I was just talking to Mary about this. I wouldn't have changed a single thing about it. As much as it irritated me at the time, I kind of fought against that fate. There wasn't much more fun stuff you can do when you're 25 years old than flying helicopters through like the Himalayas and stuff like that. So it was pretty fun. But, as you go a little bit further in your career and you start to have a family, you start to have you really get more solidified in what you're thinking you should be doing. That needs of the Army just really didn't sit as well with me over time. Also, going a little bit further in my career. So yeah, I was a young officer a platoon leader and interim company commander in Alaska. We deployed to where you see that picture there in northern Pakistan. And I led a group there. I was about the 6th highest ranking officer on a task force named Task Force Denali that got the 2000 World Aviation Award. And it was actually a really good humanitarian mission. We saved something like 10,000 lives and assisted something like 1 million. So, really good, fulfilling missions. And then did some more training, and then went to be the VIP flight company commander in Korea. And then fast forward a little bit more, and I've got 2 kids. I'm almost promotable to major, already kind of like, you're in your early 30s, but you're kind of somewhat senior in your Army career. And had a daughter there who's in the bottom right-hand photo, and she was born premature, no major issues, but of course she needed some special attention for the first 6 or 12 months. And the Army could just not leave me alone. Like they wanted me to be the Australia desk chief, and they wanted me to constantly just move around the Pacific Ocean. And I didn't know the term work-life balance. Had never heard that until I got in the corporate world, but that was definitely something I was looking for. Just like when you need to be left alone and be able to focus on family, it's nice to have that. And you just couldn't really get that. And then I had another consideration. So, I'm building up to why I was getting out of the military, because honestly, I've asked every military person I've interviewed since I've gotten out of the Army, and every military person will get to ask this as you get out of the military, is why are you leaving the military? Sounds like you've had a great career. Why are you leaving? You've been so successful. And I was successful. I was one of the youngest people promoted to major. But really, you look at the next 5 years of your life, and it's, as a major in the Army, you're pretty much a staff officer. So you go where the Army needs you and you fill out paperwork. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound that much fun. Like, it was redeeming being a helicopter pilot in, weird Ford locations. Would be great to have gone back and been like a diplomat or something like that. But just sitting around filling a office job for the sake of it just didn't sound fun to me. And then, I was talking to all my friends that had gotten out. So because of the Marshall Scholarship, because of flight school, I actually owed the Army 9 years. I ended up doing a little over 10. But so my friends that had gotten out at 5 years or 7 years or 8 years, which was most of my friends, kept talking about, they were an expat, they were making tons of money, they were enjoying their job, they had these like 2-week vacations, they didn't deploy at all. So it was all these greener pastures. And so those were kind of all affected my decision to leave. So if you want to go to the next one, Mary. So as I was, deciding to leave, I started reaching out to some of these headhunters, lots of headhunters, especially for military officers. They're wanting to place you. There's a few corporations that really, really know how to place and use military officers. Those are like your Amazons, your Apples, your McKinsey Consulting would know, it's essentially all the companies that know you're okay with working 80 hours a week. And, that they can get you for much cheaper, 40% cheaper than someone else coming out of an MBA or something like that. And they know that you have basically a similar skill set. You have and maybe even better work ethic. But what you'll immediately notice, well, one, I didn't want to work for any of those kind of companies. I didn't want to work for more than like 50 hours a week. I was looking for that work-life balance. I didn't really want a resume builder. I didn't need it. I didn't feel like it. And, so I wanted to find like a normal corporation, one that maybe was exactly what I have now, which is kind of like a big umbrella corporation with lots of operating companies, or, kind of one of those quiet corporations that makes, components that lead to the whole bigger picture of everything. I kind of wanted to understand that. I wanted to understand how the stock market worked, how mergers and acquisitions worked. And I had done all this great stuff in the Army. I fulfilled insane missions that no one could imagine in both Korea and Pakistan, things that had never been done. Me and a team of 30 people did it. And, so led these amazing missions, reconciled millions of dollars of lost and damaged inventories, trained up these huge workforces to do something that is extremely difficult. But none of those accomplishments really translated. So that was something I ran into early on. You have this military lingo, and it's great to go into what's called an officer record brief, your kind of evaluation at the end of each year. But if you send those, even if it's the best officer record brief you've ever seen in your life, and I was rated the number one of 42 captains in Korea, that did not translate. No one in the corporate world cared. And then, but a lot of people do have hired military officers. Those military officers do extremely well, and they want to replicate that experience. So you'll get a lot of offers. I mean, I think probably 60 or 70% of the firms I interviewed with did make me an offer. But it was really hard when you get that offer to translate it into, is this something good? Because the net pay in the Army is masked in a different way than the net pay in the corporate world. The net pay in the Army is you have a decent salary. It's publicly, it's published on the internet. Anyone can look it up right now. If you want to know exactly what your rank is times how many years you've been in service, you'll know exactly someone's base pay. Your housing allowance is very similar. You can look that up. If you've got a bunch of special schools or speak languages or whatever like that, you can add in some of those factors, and you'll have a pretty decent salary at the end of the day if you know how to work that system. But in the corporate world, you're looking at all this and they're saying, okay, well, they matched this retirement fund, and which at the time the Army did not do any of that sort of thing. They have all these number of benefits, this healthcare, that healthcare, this health savings plan, all sorts of things you're not familiar with. So I really had no idea what a good offer looked like. I was trying to lay them out against each other. Some simple math I did know how to do was kind of compare a salary, like a take-home pay, versus the area of the country that they were trying to move me to. A $10,000 higher salary in Palo Alto is not going to cut it compared to a $10,000 less salary in North Carolina. I knew that much. And then once I actually took a job, even in the corporate job I took, and I think a lot of my friends had this very similar thing, is when you're still looking very trim. I got out. I'll tell a couple of funny stories. I got out. I was a major in the Army, a pretty senior rank. I looked very young, but in the military, you wear your rank literally on your chest or your collar or wherever. And so people can kind of tell at least you're such and such age or such and such experience level. But I get out, my boss had hired me. She was the director level, showing me around my department. She's introducing me to these 26 people that were in my department. And they had also simultaneously hired a new graphic designer out of Appalachia State. And he was supposed to join, kind of tall, blonde-haired kid. And, he's 22 or 23 years old. And they're showing me around. And two of the young ladies that were in my graphics department were like, "Oh, are you Jay?" And I'm like, no, not Jay, Matt. And they're like, "Oh, you're the new graphic designer?" I was like, "No, I'm not the new graphic designer." So I immediately went to my boss's office right after that. I was kind of laughing. She was laughing. She's like, "You do look young." I was like, "Yeah, I'm growing a beard tomorrow." I was like, I just got out of 14 years of not being able to grow a beard. I was like, "I'm going to grow a beard tomorrow." So she's like, "You don't even look like you can grow a beard." I was like, "Oh, I'm definitely growing a beard and I'm never shaving it." So you'll see even today, I still have a beard because I don't like, going to an office with all the senior people and then being like, "Oh, you look too young to be in this room. You lost." So, and then maybe a month later, I was having an interesting conversation. I hadn't started up one of the things I'll talk about here in a second, an engagement group. But I was going out. I think it was Veterans Day. I joined my company in August, and I think maybe it was Veterans Day, and I was staying out there. And this lady, this senior executive assistant, was standing there, and she was like, "Oh, you're Matt. Oh, you're the one that took over customer service." I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, you're really," she's like, "Thank you so much for your service to the country and everything, but you're really lucky to have a job." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "I got tons of job offers coming out of the military." And she's like, "Well, my friend got kicked out of the military as a private first class, and he's having a lot of trouble getting a job." I was like, "Well, there's 1.3 million people in the military, ranging from 4-star general to private, ranging from super solid performer to a terrible performer that gets kicked out. But you'll notice that as a military person wearing a uniform, you're all, to even the civilians that you support, you're all the same. Like you all represent the same group, and then there's good and bad to that. But in the corporate world, that was the perception for the first 2 years I got. It's like, oh, wow, it's really cool you're in the Army, but like, how'd you land this job? And so I think that's why a lot of people actually go get an MBA to kind of put like 2 years between them and the military. It's not so much for the experience. It's more for like the name of the MBA and to like let 2 years go by. Because as soon as I started introducing myself as like, oh, hey, I'm the payment marketing manager. I used to be the customer service manager for GVR US. Then everyone's like, oh, wow, okay, that's great. And now, in my intros, it's almost 6 years removed. I almost never really even mentioned the military. It comes up usually like a month or two after I've met somebody. And then they're like, then it's an add-on, then it's a bonus. And it's super cool. But you'll notice a little bit of that like bias, natural bias. Another funny story I'll share with this small group is, so of course I took my military bearing and military mindset, everything with me leaving the military. And the one thing I wouldn't tolerate in the military, and it's why my units never had any accidents, why we were always top performers, is because I never tolerated anyone lying to me or even not giving me the full picture. And so, and I was, as customer service manager, I was in charge of making these upwards of like $250,000 decisions daily on customer issues that would arise. A truck one time like exploded on the highway or something. I had to decide to like replace 8 gas pumps, in a whim. And it's easy to make those sort of decisions, in my opinion, if you have all the information, but difficult if someone's masking that information from you. And my sales guy from Detroit was always like the shadiest guy, always giving you 20% of the truth and purposely omitting or drawing false lines between things that did not connect. And one day it was so close to massive equivocation that I would call it an all-out lie. And it didn't cost the company much. $20,000 was the bad decision I made. But I got so mad at him. I called him, I cussed him out, told him I'd kick his ass if he ever did anything like that again. He immediately went to HR and complained. And this was not something I was used to coming from the military. And so, HR comes to me with like a memo the next day, like a letter they wanted me to sign. And this was like 6 months into being customer service manager. And they sitting down, hey, this is very serious, and I'm like, so is like the sales guy getting written up? And they're like, no, why? I'm like, well, he straight up lied. Like he blatantly lied, costing the company like $20,000. Like, well, you got to be kind of chill about those things. And I was like, but over the phone, I got mad at him for it and I'm getting written up. And they're like, yeah, keep it up. You're like going to wrangle in the sales team. It's good. But, we just got to write you up for it. So you'll have those transition pains. Honestly, it's only helped me. But I've had to tiptoe at certain times when otherwise I'd be like, hey, you're lying, knock it off. I've had to develop a bit more tact than I would have had in the military, where I would have called someone out. And actually, no one would have had the bravery after a day to like make those sort of things in the military. So next one, please, Mary. So, but like I said, aside from a couple weird faux pas in my first year, it was extremely successful. I can see why military does have a reputation when you're recruiting, when you're hiring ex-military veterans. The reason why they're considered a special group is they often don't get hired and they don't retain well. And the retention problem I could absolutely see. Almost, I would say, I saw some statistics as I was coming out, and I think I read one maybe a year ago. Something like 60 or 70% of military leaves their first job within 6 to 8 months. And a couple of those faux pas that I was talking about, even like weird experiences that I have, and I'm pretty like relaxed, like likable guy, and I still had those just because the culture is so different. It takes a little adjusting period. So I noticed a lot of those as well amongst my peers. I think I joined my company with 7 people they were trying to recruit from the military. Only 2 of us stuck with it beyond 6 or 7 months. And he and I actually stuck. He just actually took a job he finally left the company that I'm still with maybe a week ago. And it was to take a chief operating officer position up in his home state in New York. So, I mean, it was a great move for him. But he and I, like, once you make it past that 6 or 8 month time period, and what I always tell veterans, like coming out, transitioning, is like, stick it out to a year. Because like literally at 6 months, I was coming home every day. Like, this was a mistake. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, why did I decide to go to the corporate world? At month like 9, I was like, okay, I can tolerate this. It's getting a little bit better. By 1 year, I was like, I'm finding my groove. And honestly, I haven't looked back since that point. I've really enjoyed it. You know, the only thing that would even make me consider another job, because I love this one so much, is, you know, probably more money in a more exciting location. But it almost doesn't get, you know, more exciting than expat life in like a high growth market. So as I was recruiting people into the corporate world, my company after 2 years made me a recruiter. And, you know, one of the struggles I had was like, I was like, hey, what are you looking for? I was always trying to communicate with my company. You know, there's different skill sets that I can kind of see translate to different corporate capabilities. And they're like, hey, always just find someone like you. I'm like, well, for what job? And it would just always come down to, hey, just find me someone else like you. And that's not a recruiting strategy. It's not a recruiting strategy because you don't know what to say to the candidate. And also, once you find the perfect candidate, you're like, oh, this person could work amazing wherever we place them. Then the company hems and haws over for a month or two on where to place them. And then they go take some other job, because those other, like I said at the beginning, there are 7 or 8 or 10 corporations that absolutely know how to recruit and retain military, but almost the rest of the Fortune 500 does not. And my company honestly does not. But I was trying to kind of teach them and come up with a strategy. We're getting there. We have some amazing military talent in our company, but it's definitely not what it could be. Another thing I noticed about corporations is I must have been like 1 in a million, because I told every company, you know, Amazon offered me some project manager job, rolling out new transfer sites or something like that. And Apple, some project manager job, you know, everyone, some project manager job. I'm like, what is this project manager? Like, I don't have a PMP. I don't want to do that. But they know that that's where military generally succeeds. I just wanted to be in a leadership position. The reason I took the job that I was in, it was maybe the only leadership position I actually got offered. And that always astounded me. Every company is just completely hurting on leaders, but they'll almost never hire someone directly into a leadership position. So, you know, my advice to people coming out of the military is just keep pushing for it. That company that actually gives you that chance is probably worth it. And then to the corporations is like, take a chance. For me, they put me in the most failing department that they had. It was 12% engagement scores, massive attrition. There weren't even KPIs to hit, key performance indicators to actually accomplish. So it was basically starting from scratch or rebuilding it like a sinking ship, but I loved it. And I was very successful at it. So, and they couldn't find anyone within the company that could do that. So I do think that's a good way to use military. And then another observation of mine is 3 years into the corporate world, there must have been a calendar sent out on LinkedIn or something, because on year 3 of my transition out of the corporate world, I got about 10 million recruiters coming after me. So 3 years in the corporate world, like I said, 2 years for an MBA, 3 years just actively working in the corporate world. Ex-military seems to be like one of the most desirable things in the corporate world. And then my one last call out that I noticed from recruiting is there's a lot of military out there. A lot of them are absolutely outstanding. A lot of companies, especially those without the strategy on how to recruit and retain veterans in their first year, will always settle for the bottom 60%. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and kind of like this cycle where they are skeptical about the military recruits that they're going to get. They get these, because of that, the top 40 go to the people that are prepared and wanting them. Then they say, well, we have to get like 2 people who are veterans to fill some, I don't know, number quota or something. And human resource has some KPI on it. And so they have to hire 2 veterans, and they hire probably the worst ones they could get. Those people come, damage the group that they're in for 6-8 months and leave. So if they're not a right fit, they're not a right fit. You hire based on the person, based on how they interview. And, if you're going to recruit them, like actively do it as a passion and not to fill a quota. And then my last slide is mostly speaking to corporations. I don't know if there's anyone on the call from a corporation. Sorry, I have 2 more slides. So one other thing I did, and this I actually did not want to do, is probably the furthest thing from my mind as I was transitioning. I did not want to be the leader of any sort of like employee resource group. I didn't even know what that was. I basically started the first one at my corporation. But I did want to lead people, and I did want to, bring people together and fix broken processes and stuff like that. And what I noticed is my team, my customer service team, was always kind of taking bad information from the field. And the field had a lot of veterans that were in sales, and dumping that bad information with no translation into the factory, and therefore just corrupting the factory, causing all sorts of dilemmas. And the factory was about 12% veterans. And so, one time, both sales and
Matt, you've gone quiet suddenly.
I don't know why. Okay, sorry, I don't know why. So anyway, one way that I could find commonality is with so many veterans in sales and operations and my department in between. That was actually a way to bring them all together. And then they all said, hey, there's got to be some way that we can all join up and do something. So basically, one other Marine Corps veteran and I started this employee resource group kind of from scratch. We just wanted to, give back to our community and do a little bit of stuff. But as I got more into it, I noticed 4 things. So this group required almost no attention, and they wanted to just give back so much to their community or to each other.
Matt, we can't hear you.
I don't know why you can't hear me.
No.
I just unplugged and replugged.
There you go. I can hear. Now we can hear you. That's good.
That's always how I fix my helicopter in the Army. Is if something malfunctions, you just turn it off and back on. Works 99% of the time. So the last thing is, it was a great vertical link throughout the organization. I have this picture here with all these people in the factory. The 2 people wearing white shirts in the middle are actually the president and the CEO. One with the dark blue shirt is the head of HR. And, there's some other people like the head of the factory. All were veterans from different countries, actually. And a lot of those people in the factory that were maybe in the second row there, they had never even seen those people. So even getting together for like a Veterans Day or a couple events a year was like a huge engagement for them. And then they spread kind of good cheer throughout the factory or whatever organization they're part of. So it was a really good thing. So the last slide, Mary, before we open it up for just dialogue, because I think I've probably talked too much. If I was the head of a corporation, and there are about 10 corporations in the US that do this, and maybe around the world, I don't know, like Europe, but I assume the same thing, because Europe has a lot of outstanding military organizations. And actually, even I'm second in charge of my business here in India, and we've hired 2 or 3 amazing veterans to actually run some of our most challenging positions that were really struggling only 6 months ago, and to turn it around. But if I was going to go out and say, hey, hire the military, have a strategy, recruit only the best, and then put them in the most challenging leadership positions. Don't ask them to be if they want to be a project manager, make them a project manager. But you've got to have leadership gaps. I see leadership gaps like 60% of my business. So for a corporation to say they don't have a gap in leadership where they can put somebody that's an outstanding leader, I think is poor self-reflection. You got to give them clear guidance and trust. If you don't want to give them clear guidance, then just give them trust. But really, if someone says, hey, this is your boundaries, this is what I want you to do, and just go execute, no one better to do it than someone that's been some time in the military. Also, a lot of corporations I've noticed really, really struggle to find their vision and purpose. My company, for example, we just IPO'd as a new company maybe 6 months ago. And the vision and mission statement and everything that we have was actually developed by me and 5 other people, 3 of us veterans, on a special project mission to acquire a company like 3 years ago. So, and the company had existed for 150 years before that and never had like a real vision or purpose of what they were trying to do. Like, why are they acquiring someone, and why? And there's military on this, a bunch of military on this project. And we said, well, first, before we like go out and say why we want to acquire someone, we have to say like why they make sense for us. It wasn't margins and revenues and this and that. It was, hey, is this us? Is this culturally a fit for us? Is this like, why this company? And I think because the group was like half military, it really helped put like a vision and purpose to that project, which actually trickled down 3 years later to my whole corporation. And then I also noticed that military leaders are very happy to just mentor if asked to. And then there's a lot of low engagement groups. They can be the newest hires right out of college is one. Usually there's like a mid-career point between like 7 and 10 years that struggle. And those are usually your high turnover, low engagement groups. Putting a military veteran as like a mentor once they've been in the corporate world for a year or two has been very successful for us. And then, I'd always challenge them to do more. You can never let someone that's a veteran, they'll find their work-life balance, they'll find their purpose and everything. But if you let them coast, they start to lose interest. So you've got to constantly challenge them. And, when they're in those very challenging situations, when I first came to GVR in India, it had lost its vision. It had lost its leader. The person that hired me to come over quit 3 weeks before I came over. So when I arrived, I was basically not really in charge, just none of us had leaders, but there was like 6 VP level, like level 1 leaders. And they had lost their way. So it was very easy to be like an agent of cultural change, to start to put things correct. And when we got a new boss, we started operating again at like almost full functionality. So those are the ways that I would use, veteran officers, and probably all veterans, but specifically officers, if I was going to hire again tomorrow. So I'll open it up. I know I mostly just talked about myself. So.
And I think it's a small enough group that if people just want to unmute and ask questions, they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe I'll start, Matt, with a kind of question that is a question a lot at the moment around mental health and those sorts of things. And I'm kind of intrigued about how you feel that transition is into the corporate, the mental health side of things, and whether do veterans need different kinds of support from companies, or do you think it's non-specific? I don't know. I mean, it's just an intriguing question. That
it's a good question. I guess I probably was lucky to never have like such an experience or such a personality where an experience would like stick with me and like traumatize. But I know a lot of people that struggle with it. I think the corporate world is set up well with all the health benefits and insurances and stuff that if anyone explains what's available, it's readily available. The problem with the corporate world is, unlike the military, which is set up to have its own psychologist, that, if you're having trouble, you can go to a chaplain, you can go to a psychologist, you can go to anything for free. It's completely confidential. And then they'll get you the help that you need. That structure, that support structure is not there in the corporate world. Though the corporate world has every avenue, like they will happily throw tons of money at any problem and try to make it go away, but it's not readily apparent like who you have to go to. So I did notice a huge change on that. A lot of people struggling with PTSD, I probably haven't seen any that are like actively on medication, or at least I wouldn't know. And because I think they struggle integrating a little bit more than someone who, again, has that personality where those things don't bother them, and they had that stressful of an experience. I had a lot of soldiers who struggled with PTSD in the military. You know, a lot of them stick in the military, or when they come out, they really struggled, not just to integrate into corporate world, which is a step, I would say, above just integrating back into society. I think they're the first step for people that have, you know, mental health issues, PTSD mostly, I think is what we're referring to specifically for the military. I think they struggle with even step one of like getting back into the society level and holding an hourly job or something like that. There is a possibility that some of them go into like the factory life, though I talk to a lot of people, and like, you know, always in the engagement group, we'd have like a beer and share experiences. All the ones that seem to have integrated and held a job probably don't struggle with PTSD. They'll share their experiences happily and joke about it, cry about it, whatever. Those are all healthy reactions. And I never noticed anyone having had about 6 or 7 soldiers that had PTSD in the military, very much struggled with it. Very dangerous to be around weapons. You know, one story I guess I'll share. One of my soldiers killed himself actually after, you know, he actually got a lot of help, and then, but still killed himself right on the psychologist's lawn one morning, right before physical training time. And so, I mean, those struggles are absolutely real. I can recognize folks with PTSD pretty easily, having had a lot of my soldiers have with PTSD in the military, but I've never seen them in the corporate world. So I think they become more of a societal dilemma than a corporate dilemma. I don't think they can even get past, sounds bad, but they probably can't even get past the interview, you know, or they probably don't want to go to the interview. So while the corporation would probably happily help any of its people with like tons of money or resources or insurances or whatever, I've never really seen it in my corporate experiences. And I've been under 3 different umbrella companies now. Even though one operating company, I've bounced between different investment companies. And so we always have a different culture, different insurance. So I actually have had a pretty broad corporate experience. And I can't think of any, like all of us are connected as veterans. You know, the guy who I started up the engagement group with, one of his best friends committed suicide 2 years ago, PTSD. But again, he had trouble integrating back into society for like 10 years. I don't know if he'd ever held a corporate job. So I don't know. The PTSD doesn't really come into the corporate picture because most of those folks I don't think even apply for corporate jobs. If that answers the question.
No, that's great. No, that's great. Does anybody else have any questions?
Matt, I got a question for you, just a quick one. I'm John, I'm the chairman of the MAC, so great to hear you talk this evening. Thanks very much for taking part. Matt, you're a very compelling advocate for former servicemen and women in the workplace, and I've had really happy experience of working alongside them in service too. But sometimes they appear to employers to come with downsides as well. You know, people say they're institutionalized. So in your experience, how do you head that off? How do you work against negative preconceptions about veterans?
Well, so like I said, the first 6, 8, 12 months is very difficult because you still, I don't know, the first 8 months, I still looked like I was in the military, I think. You know, I still had short hair, you know, clean shaved, you know, held myself differently, spoke differently. There's kind of like an integration into the corporate world time. And it's not so much a hard integration, like it just takes time. And some of those, so my department that got me, when they heard I was a major coming out of the military, that was the other reason they didn't think that I could be the person. I had to be the graphic designer because I didn't look like the military. So a lot of folks that do look military, do act military, I think they probably will have some stigmas against them until they kind of have to prove themselves. You know, like I said, time and the ability to just prove that you're like a trustworthy, good person will generally pay off. The institutionalization, there are companies that it definitely helps to work for. Ones that
so I lead innovation here now in my company for India. India likes to think of itself as super innovative, and it is in a lot of software stuff. But how they think of innovation is a complete like chaotic mess that never gets organized. And I absolutely disagree. I think there's a way to approach it like any other problem. I think there's a business system for innovation. I think there's a business system for finding insights. I think there's a business system for recording insights. I think there's a business system for reporting that to investors and asking for money and making a pitch and making an ask and acquiring a company and integrating a company. And I think it's a lazy way to say, hey, it's innovative and we're just going to, shoot from the hip. I've never believed in that. So, it kind of just depends. If a company is organized and has a business system, I've noticed that learning very quickly the business system language, like they call me a VBSL, a volunteer business system leader. I've never even had the course. They don't even know that. I happen to be a systems engineer from West Point and like processes to be in place so I can visualize how much money we're spending on various things and what KPI is being tracked and things like that, and how I know if I'm winning or losing. But as soon as I learned to speak that language, like, oh, I'm a business system leader. Yeah, right. I'm not a process oriented person. That definitely helped. And I learned all the tools very quickly within a year. I don't think I ever went to any of the formal classes, but observed what everyone was talking about, the language they were using to effectively get their point across, because I knew exactly what I was trying to do. I knew exactly how I wanted to organize, how I wanted to structure. I had no idea how to ask for the right head count. I had no idea how to process improve or let someone go that was just ineffective. But I learned all those like HR techniques and things over time. And of course, I picked a couple mentors. That was also huge. My boss, I couldn't have asked for a better first boss. The lady that hired me was incredible. And she liked veterans. She liked the military. Her son was in the military for like 3 or 4 years. That really helped. So I could go to her with any issue. And then my boss's boss, the global VP of all the factories, was also ex-military. So I could go to him as well. So having a couple mentors, when I could tell them, and they were senior people that had been through that transition as well. And I could say, hey, I've got this problem. Like, I know I need these 4 people. I know that it takes 80, like for my team to effectively get all their work done, they would have to work 80 hours a week. What's that called? Oh, it's called tack time. How do I do an analysis? Like, how do I do a tack time analysis? Okay, you walk through this process, you communicate in this way to the company. That was hugely helpful. So like mentorship and learning the language of the business, and then kind of like never getting down. I can't say that I never got down, but being like, pivoting around, and like if someone says no, I kind of like never accepted no as an answer. That definitely helped. I don't think anyone ever called me like institutionalized, but maybe a couple times as like a bad word, I've been called too process driven. But it's usually by the people that call themselves innovative, and they're not. So
yeah.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Sounds very familiar. Well done. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Matt, I'm Zach. I'm a second lieutenant in the Air Force over. I'm a Marshall Scholar right now. So
nice, excellent.
I'm growing out the mustache and getting the hair long during my years in England while I can, or in the UK while I can. But thanks for putting this on. It was cool. I probably won't be able to utilize many of these things for a few years, just because I've got my service after this. I went to the Air Force Academy. But I was curious about, I guess, was there a good network of veterans that you were able to tap into for advice that were already maybe in the corporate world or whatever, I guess in your case, the corporate world, that you were able to tap into besides, I mean, you said you had your friends who had gotten out previously, but was that kind of, was it just your friends that you knew, or was there a different kind of organization that helped out with that, or maybe like the Army themselves, did they help out with any kind of connections, just anything like that?
So there are a ton of like veteran networks. I didn't particularly use them. A ton of them will Well, that's not actually true. So when you're getting out of the military, whenever you get out of the military, 5, 10, 20 years from now, there'll be headhunters that come after you, depending on how senior you are in the military. If you're somewhere between 3 to 10 years, you're called a JMO, a junior military officer. If you're like, and then there's an awkward stage of like 10 to 12 when actually a lot of people get out, but they don't really have a classification for those folks. And then you're more of like a senior military if you're like 12 to 25 years in the military. You're too indoctrinated, or you're too institutionalized to be like of so much value to the corporate world. So there are these headhunting groups. They act as kind of a social network or a conduit, and they do amazing work. There's 3 or 4 of them that are actually incredible organizations. And then there's dozens of others that try to like do something. And then of course you will have your friends that were a little bit ahead of you that tried it, or unless you're the first one. Of course, the academy always tries to put on something. One of the ways that I try to recruit, it's very competitive and very difficult to recruit because it's disorganized in a recruiting sense, is the Service Academy Career Conference. So anyone that went to like West Point, Annapolis, Air Force, I think Merchant Marines, and definitely Coast Guard can go to this as they're getting out. And then usually any corporation that has someone that went to one of those can also go to recruit. And I tried through that. It was so competitive. I had a great funnel of candidates. But I mean, like I said, there's 8 or 10 companies that really, really know how to recruit military. And they kind of took all the people in my recruitment funnel. So you will have, a lot of amazing networks. The service academies, it is good. It's good on the hiring side. Like if you want to go to an Amazon or a Koch Industries or something like that, or a Deloitte or McKinsey, you absolutely go to one of those Service Academy career conferences, negotiate for 10% higher than whatever they're trying to offer you, and take that job. It's absolutely not a bad job, especially, it's a resume builder or whatever. A lot of folks also, I would say 70 or 80% that want to go in the corporate world almost immediately go back to like Harvard or Duke or Yale or wherever, some good MBA program, and then get recruited by those top agencies. The exact same people, but you'll get offered maybe like $25,000 more as a starting salary. So, that's kind of like my observations. There's a ton of people, and between the Gold Ribbon program and the 9/11 GI Bill and everything, like also because they know they're going to get paid, every university is trying to like recruit you as well. Like even like me and my buddies didn't have to take whatever the GMAT or whatever standardized test you have to take to get into an MBA program. Like that also just gets waived. When you just tell Duke, like, I don't feel like taking that. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's okay. So, I mean, there's a ton of organizations. It kind of just depends what you want to do. That's all the corporate stuff, and there's almost more than enough. What there's not really is an unbiased like mentorship type organization. I'd say the service academies are as close as that gets, but they don't ask for mentors that are kind of unbiased. All the people that are mentors are actually VPs of some company representing that company, paying into the service academy network, and then getting like their first dibs on candidates. So everyone's kind of got their.
We're all advocates of something.
Huh?
Yeah. I just said we're all advocates of something, but yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah. What are you studying right now?
Just reminded me, Matt, that the last session we did with the military a few weeks ago, we talked about putting together an AMS group of military scholars, because that would be the perfect place to have that kind of mentoring and in some ways unbiased. So it's reminded me. I've just added it to my very long list of things I need to do.
Yeah, it's a good one. I don't know, Mary, what you've seen. I think a lot of military do stay in a lot of marshals stay in the military for a long time because they get promoted quickly. I think, Joe Wells is like a lieutenant colonel now, moving to Fort Hood to become a battalion commander. Jay, I think, still a doctor. Ann got out, she's a lawyer. I'm trying to think of all my West Point buddies and like Ann O'Donnell and all of them. I don't know if you have any stats, like what people are actually doing. I don't know many that have actually gone into the corporate world that were marshals.
we don't have many stats, but I think a lot go into academia. Actually, I think is more like almost most Marshall scholars. There seems to be more going into academia, or you know, being an astronaut. You know, whatever, you know, whichever route you want to take. Are there any other questions?
Matt, I was just well, I was gonna answer your question that I never got to answer, and then also ask a kind of a follow up, something you just mentioned. So I'm going from here. I'm in my first year now, so I'll do one more year here, and then I'm probably going to go to medical school. Or I'm applying to medical school this summer, and then I'll do my applications and hopefully get in. We'll see how all that works out.
Nice.
But you mentioned I don't know many people that are military, martial, and then do medical school. I mean, it's just a very like small subsets. Yeah. So you mentioned there was somebody that you knew that's a doctor?
Jay Choi. Yeah. You should link up with Jay Choi. He's from my class. He went to UC Irvine after the Marshall Scholarship, and then I kind of lost touch with him, but through like friends of friends, you know, we made sure each other are doing fine.
Yeah. I'm sure I could find. So how do you spell his last? Choi? How do you spell it?
Choi.
Okay, I'm sure I can find it somehow. But yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to find different people who've done something that I'm hoping to do, and it's just like so many subsets. So, but that's good. Thank you.
You know, one thing, Zach, you might run into. I don't know how intense the wars are right now, or deployments, or anything like that. When I was a Marshall Scholar, you know, my first classmate died. She was a good friend of mine. Died before I even started the Marshall Scholarship. You know, I went to China to get a little bit better at Chinese before actually going to like London and studying at SOAS. And she actually passed away in like August. And I was like, wait, I haven't stopped messing around, taking my summer vacation. How is like one of my classmates already in Iraq and died? And then, you know, I think my class at West Point was the highest attrition in terms of casualties and deaths. And even when I just started flight school, one of my best friends that I had studied with over there in Europe, he was in Italy while I was in the UK. He passed away in Afghanistan, and I was later flying in that same valley. But you know, that's one weird thing about the Marshall is like, I think 3 years went by before I was ever even doing anything like active, and it's just compounded like by the doctor thing. You know, you'll be 6 years, 8 years, and some of your friends will be very much seeing like lots of action. So there's no advice there. It's just an interesting thing that's probably, you know, coming your way. I would say, I guess my advice would be like, never let it get you down. Like you'll have your time where you have to like save lives or do something. So yeah, time passes by quickly.
Yeah, I haven't experienced that quite yet in terms of either someone dying or anything, but a lot of my friends are at UPT, undergraduate pilot training and stuff like that. So
yeah,
you know, there are accidents at UPT all the time. I mean, not all the time, but they do happen. But I can definitely see that coming my way. But I appreciate your advice on not letting it get me down. So I'll definitely have my time in the military to serve there. So
yeah,
that's true.
Okay, anybody else got any questions? I think actually people are beginning to, we're getting very close to our time. So I think I will draw this to a close. Matt, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting and I think very helpful as well. And has reminded me that we were going to look at trying to get the AMS to set up a military group, which I think would be of great value for the military scholars, the new ones and the old ones and the ones in between. So thank you very much for doing this. We do have, actually we have another military marshal doing a hangout next week. And so I hope you'll all join us. It's going to be a very different presentation, but I hope you'll all join us again. And thank you everybody for joining us today, and have a good evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Mary. Thanks everyone.